Welcome back, everyone. I wanted to use a presentation that I've given to a number of audiences at Cranert as an opportunity to maybe frame and summarize a little bit about what I'm looking for in terms of your first homework that is going to be due here in the first week of class. And that really is just an introductory video. I mentioned specifically what I'm looking for in the syllabus and in my syllabus overview that I just recorded for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive into this. This is really an attempt to give you some perspective where I've come on mentoring, my own mentoring experiences at IBM and the support that I got from the company in terms of establishing both mentoring relationships with those that I needed help and support from. And then more importantly, the, the, uh, the mentoring of others within IBM, but more importantly, how getting involved heavily at Purdue and Cranert has just opened up, a world of opportunity for me, and how it's, improving my network and personal relationships and getting exposure to a number of different opportunities that would not have been there but for my getting involvement and giving back to Purdue and the School of Management in Cranert specifically. So that'll be a chunk of what I'm going to describe to you, hopefully briefly in 10 minutes or so. This is going to be my mentoring journey, and hopefully you can learn some things about that. So the first thing I'm asking you guys to do is some introspection. I referenced in the syllabus and in the written document the importance of determining what your strengths are. And there's a specific book and a specific method and an approach that we used at IBM that ultimately entailed reading Strength Finder 2.0. And we went through, a period of introspection ourselves as managers and leaders within IBM to determine what we were really good at. And until you take inventory of what you're good at, you cannot impart any of that wisdom and skill to anybody else. And it essentially just greases the skids in terms of doing a better job of empathizing and reaching out to others and putting your own self-interests, in the background and really focusing on and listening to the people that you're trying to build relationships with. So the first thing that I like to describe here on this particular, PowerPoint page is what makes you you. So you got to establish a personal brand, and in my case, you know, if somebody gets to know me, and more importantly, it informs my relationship with those both above me, the peer of mine, and certainly the people I'm working with as a coach and mentor, is there's a whole lot about me that doesn't meet necessarily the eye. And so I ask you to do a little self-inventory. Who are those role models that you've had in life? Who are those coaches you had in sports when you were growing up? And who are the teachers? And who are the parents? And who are the inspirational leaders that you just wanted to model your career after? In my case, I didn't have to go awfully far. For many of you, it's a parent. In my case, my dad especially has been a terrific role model. What I get is two for one with my dad. He was actually able to play and was taught by and coached by the famous, most successful college basketball coach of all time, Coach John Wooden, who's got a very strong relationship with Purdue. He was I guess, three-time captain of the Purdue basketball team when he was on campus, and more importantly, he was an academic All-American when he was on campus. And Wooden had great pride in his Purdue experience. And by the way, one of his greatest mentors was Piggy Lambert. And for those that know Purdue pretty well, Lambert Fieldhouse, you never realized there was a person behind that name. And it was a very successful Purdue basketball coach back in the 30s and 40s. And he was very instrumental in John Wooden's, development as a coach and a mentor and a teacher. So back to my dad, I won't bore you to tears in this particular, this particular page, but just learned a lot from him in terms of his teaching and his coaching skills, where he came from, being on the cutting edge of, an integrated basketball team, both in college, that's pretty famous, and then ultimately managing and coaching an inner city basketball team to much success over his career. The fact that he almost died in action as a side gunner and a radio operator on a B-24 and taking part in very dangerous missions, and essentially his plane was shot down over enemy territory, and he had to make his way back to his lines and in safety. He just got a ton of experiences that I've been able to model my life after, and that's part of what makes me me. I'm a parent of 2 daughters, which informs me on a number of different levels, but most notably, it's been fun to be their coach, their teacher, their mentors. They've taught me a whole lot about stuff, including relationships and using technology. They're a classic example of a reverse mentoring relationship. I don't think they've ever heard me say this to them, but I'm learning as much from them as I have imparted my wisdom to them over the years. So I'm very proud of them. And one of my daughters, my eldest, is actually in M&A consulting. So she has actually followed a bit of my career path. So it's fun to continue to be her mentor outside of my own parental relationship with her as we move forward in her professional career. As we're kind of going around the 4 chart quadrant here on the right-hand side, the Purdue experience has just been amazing. The number of relationships that I've been able to develop with, a famous, in this case, one of these pictures is with Brian Cardinal, who won an NBA championship and was an esteemed Purdue basketball player when he was on campus. My next door neighbor, Pete Quinn, who is in the Football Hall of Fame and one of Purdue's most famous football players, and is actually the voice of Purdue football, along with Tim Newton for broadcasting the football games. Just the number of relationships that I've been able to develop, all the way up through the president of the university, Mitch Daniels, and the president of the board of trustees, Mike Berghoff, the dean of multiple schools, including Hummel's at Krannert. It all started with my giving back to students in Krannert and at the School of Technology, and that just allowed me to broaden my network over the last 3 or 4 years. That has just given me a whole perspective on life that I had not had up until that point. Obviously, I'm a big Cub fan. I love Chicago, and the picture there is with my daughter and some of her friends attending a Chicago Cub baseball game. So I'm a big sports fan, and have a number of interests there. And then last but not least, this is actually a shot of my brother, who I've looked up to for years. One of my early relationships, he's a couple years older than I am, but he's now a CEO of one of the largest recruiters of Krannert students over the last 2 years of any company. And it's been great to be a part of his life, and he made his way up to the the executive suite of his company. And to this day, I'm providing him some executive sounding board and guidance to him that he can't get from any other source but somebody like me, his brother. So that just gives you a little snapshot of me. I do reference this article very briefly at the top from Wall Street Journal. It's all about how do you establish rapport, how do you go to an event and break through the ice and establish a relationship really quickly. That article does a great job of reminding us of those skills that some of the best people in the service industry have that allow them to quickly make connections and build relationships. So next up, without boring you to tears, a little bit about my background. You see the the Krannert connection, the Purdue connection, Knight MBA, which was really interesting. Over 5+ years it took me to get that. Because of the mentoring that I got in IBM especially, and you'll get more of that actually from the videos and the podcasts that I've described to you. Plus I also have one of my mentees, one of my proteges is going to do a video for you guys. You'll get a lot more depth on the IBM structure and framework for mentoring and coaching. So I'll save that for those sources. But in general, because of the way IBM, does put a focus on mentoring, I would not have had these, many robust, rich experiences, especially in some of the profession areas that I didn't even have a background in, because I had coaches and supporters that introduced me to the right sorts of people to get the right sorts of experiences. I was able to go into a number of professional areas I would never have gotten but for those relationships that I've forged. On this chart, I just wanted to, one of my, great, I guess, moments was, and it's a great way of describing what I want you guys to do. So Lisa Sproul, who is now Lisa Henderson, has now been working for IBM for 20 years. It seemed like just yesterday. But she was a Krannert MBA, 2-year MBA, full-time. And she was getting that MBA to do a career pivot. So again, I didn't know this stuff at the time, but essentially she had several key moments going on in her life. One of them was trying to move into a different career. And bless her soul, at the time, she figured out a way to reach out to me. It was prior to LinkedIn. It was just an email, but she somehow learned that I was a Krannert mentor, or Krannert interested in being a Krannert mentor to students. And she reached out to me very boldly. It wasn't her personality. She was actually kind of introverted. She was a quant. And boy, she reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got IBM on my radar screen as a potential career, landing point. Would you be interested in coaching me and mentoring me on how to, get a job in high tech and potentially IBM?" So it all started from there, and then I ultimately had her as an intern, and then ultimately had her as an employee, and then ultimately, as you kind of evolve in the relationship, went from coaching her as her manager and developing some of her talents and skills to ultimately letting her go and moving into all kinds of cool jobs, including working in corporate office and strategy. And just paging in with her every once in a while to give her some guidance and some counseling on some of the key decision points that she was involved in, and the rest is history. She's now very senior product manager, sort of leader, and 20-year very robust experience. And boy, as a woman at the time, and not having any fear and getting outside of her comfort zone, she reached out to me, and the rest is history in terms of how a mentoring relationship has helped her get to where she needs to get to. By the way, she's helping me. I've gotten her involved in several project management classes at Krannert, and she will continue to give back as a Krannert alumni to some of the things that I am involved in at the school. Lastly, as I mentioned in the syllabus overview, you got to read this article in the Wall Street Journal. It's so timely. This Emmanuel Macron, who I read about somewhat, remotely, was interested in what was going on in the French election. This guy has essentially gone from zero to hero in a very short period of time, and this article describes how he has done that through networking and the mentors that he has had in his life, and how it has allowed him to go through multiple career changes and pivots to ultimately he just won the presidential election in France. It's just amazing what he was able to do. And if you're looking for a quick primer on how to do this mentoring stuff in an excellence sort of fashion, this article will just blow you away on how he worked the system, but more importantly, worked relationships with more senior people, and how he is able to leapfrog a whole bunch of other people to make it to the presidency of France in a very short period of time. It's just a very inspiring article.